Figure it out.
Hello, this is Adam Koralik from Figured Out Productions. The following video is a video of some kind, and I hope you enjoy it. Hey everyone, welcome to the Figured Outcast. I'm Adam Koralik, coming to you from Chicago, the Windy City. Yeah, just saying hi, hello, what's up? How are you guys doing? Hopefully you had a fun 4th of July for my fellow Americans, having a good old time there. If you're Canadian, hopefully you had a nice Canada Day there on the 1st. Or if there's any other holiday around the world that you celebrate in July, or just any day in general you had fun with, I hope you had a good time. So for those who perhaps have never heard this podcast before, basically I just about once a month I just put down a whole bunch of subjects and we just kind of go through and talk and hang out a little bit, and you can listen to them. There's subjects. The subjects are listed in the description, as well as time code is provided, so you can skip around to any subject that you like or dislike, or you're just curious about more so than the others. And feel free to listen to that. It's totally cool. The other thing that's worth noting about this podcast is that it is technically a Patreon perk. So it goes up on my Patreon, which there is a link to in the description as well. Patreon backers get the benefit of having this, right away, like the day I record it. They also can potentially, pick subjects, get shout outs, even be on the podcast, etc. But I do eventually release this publicly, which is how the vast majority of you end up listening to it. So either way, if you're a Patreon backer or if you're just somebody listening to it, I appreciate it, and thank you very much for doing so. But yeah, that's pretty much all there is to say about all that stuff. So let's just go ahead and start talking about some subjects, shall we? First and foremost, one little news subject that kind of caught my attention, because I actually did see this in person, is the NES and SNES Mini are now back in stock. I'm sure a lot of you guys know all about this, but basically the NES, for those who somehow don't, the NES and SNES Minis were little boxes Nintendo put out that look like an NES or look like an SNES, but they're really just emulators on a chip, and they come with something like 30-odd games on there, and then you plug it into a modern TV and you can just play it. Really capitalizing on the whole nostalgia thing, which is like, I don't knock anybody who wants to buy that, whatever, that's cool. Especially people who are giving up their collections to have those things instead. Great. Then there's more like retro real hardware out there, which is awesome for guys like me. Personally, I never got one of either of these. I never cared. I still don't, even though like literally today I saw them at Target for sale, both of them, and I was just like, nope, I really don't care. But to those who do, because I know obviously a lot of people do, a lot of people have been trying to find these things. You have an easier time now. Hopefully you didn't pay like inflated prices originally, because now you can get them relatively easily, just kind of in any store. So I will admit there was a small part of me that was for some reason tempted, just for a second, just because I was like, ooh, they're a little mini Nintendo hardware, that'd be cool to display somewhere. And then I was like, no, idiot, you have the actual hardware, you don't need that. So no, I didn't end up getting those things, but yeah, so there you go. I mean, if you want to talk about the mini concept, I don't like how that has really exploded, man. It's just become annoying, because then you start getting just tons of people being like, well, where is this console mini and this console mini? And then you have people like trying to replicate that success, but kind of poorly. Things like, the Atari box, which is now the Atari VCS, is kind of doing that, though debatably that thing might have real hardware, but at the same time, probably won't. I know there's some sort of Neo Geo iteration of this. Sega's doing it with the mini Mega Drive, even though it was kind of already a thing. It's those clone consoles have been out there forever. But yeah, I've never been a fan of clone console hardware in general. The difference to me with the Nintendo ones was really that Nintendo themselves was doing it, which they don't traditionally have a history of doing. I find them more interesting as discussion pieces than actual tech. But at least the SNES Mini was cool enough to give the public and distribute into the wild a final copy of Star Fox 2 for the SNES. That was actually pretty neat. So that's like the only thing to me that's kind of neat about them, is releasing, kind of unfinished prototypes or completed games that we never really got. And with that in mind, one thing I would like to see, if they do an N64 Mini, I wouldn't care about it specifically or whatever game content they put on there, with one exception. There's a Japanese game called Sin and Punishment for obviously for the N64. I own the Japanese cartridge of it. It's a very fun game. Very playable, but it's still, I know at one point Nintendo did an English translation of it for the Wii, because it was considered like the #1 game that really should have been brought over here, or at least brought to the West in general, and never was. So at least when they got around to the Wii, they actually translated it and sold the N64 ROM through the Wii shop. So they obviously did all that work. So including it on the N64 Mini as like this this unreleased game to North America anyway, or to Europe, would be kind of a neat little sales point. And I would like that, because then you could at least have like legitimate N64 ROMs that you could either reproduce onto reproduction cartridges when the N64 kind of gets closer to that, or at least through like the EverDrive or something like that. It'd be just cool to play the actual N64 version on an N64, but in English. So that would be like the one reason I really care about that continuing trend. But I don't think they're going to come out with that much frequency, because obviously as the systems go on, they get more and more complicated. Like, don't expect like a GameCube Mini in like a year or two, because replicating the GameCube just into a tiny little emulator box is not easy. You can probably get away with the N64. I think they could buy themselves some time if they did like a Game Boy Mini, which debatably is just if you're hearing all that creaking and cracking, that's just my chair. But you could probably get away with like Game Boy Minis to buy you some more time while the technology gets better. But I think once you start hitting like the GameCube, you're going to start hitting that wall before the technology is just not ready to do little emulator boxes of those. But inevitably that will happen over time. But yeah, that said, are there any in particular anybody out there would want? I know people are like, hey Adam, when you get a Dreamcast Mini? I mean, maybe just as a display piece again, because the Dreamcast happens to be my favorite console, but would I play games that way? Hell no. I just, I wouldn't care. And so no, I don't really care. But the point of this story is, if you actually do care, the NES and SNES Mini are back in stock, and go ahead and help yourself if you want them. So moving on, next subject here is Xbox related. Now at E3, and I was fortunate enough to actually get to go to Xbox's conference, one of the things they talked about was how they were going to improve the console itself with minor changes in the dashboard and things like that. One of the things specifically was a new algorithm they had created called FastStart. FastStart's intended purpose is when you put in any Xbox One game or PS4 game, the console, even if it's physical, does not just play the disc immediately. I'm sure most of you know this by now. It's been 5 years since this console has been out. Unlike older consoles where they read the data directly off the disc and just played off the disc, these have to basically install files off the disc and then play the game off of a hard drive. So that means there's wait time between when you put the disc in and when you can actually start playing it. Now, in the case of disc-based games, that's usually not that big of a deal, because what it typically does is it loads up a few files at the beginning and says, okay, you can go ahead and start now. Even though the game's not fully installed, it continues to do background installing. But that can be more problematic with online downloads. And as online downloads for games continues to gain popularity, you have more and more people who are just kind of sitting there waiting for their games, not being able to actually get into them. So Microsoft has taken it upon themselves to create this thing called FastStart, which is a complete restructure of that algorithm, I guess, so that a game can start even sooner when it's being downloaded, as opposed to having to wait. So it prioritizes certain files that the game will need in order to just do the most basic things in the game. And however, this is not like a sweeping move where they've now created FastStart so it works on every game. It's actually game specific. At the time I record this, I think only something like 26 games support it, most of which are like Xbox One titles, like arcade, if you want to call them arcade titles. Then there's some 360 titles that are backwards compatible, and even 3 OG Xbox games are compatible with it as well. Now again, as someone who uses the discs, this doesn't really affect me all that much. I mean, it's not unwelcomed. It's just, I just kind of don't care. Plus, I typically plan. I'm like, all right, if I want to play a game, like whatever the game is, whenever I get it, I just install it right away, not assuming I'm going to play it at that moment. I just kind of pop it in and walk away and go do other things. That way, when I inevitably get around to it, the game's already ready to go. It's the same reason I every once in a while just turn on an Xbox or turn on my PS4 or whatever and just kind of see if there's any updates and just let it go update everything, and I go do other things. That way I'm never really in a situation where like, oh, I need to play this game. Oh fuck, the game has like 80 updates. Like I didn't bother to do any of this. I'm never personally in that situation because I just kind of plan for it. But for those who can't for whatever reason, this should help alleviate that problem a bit. So hopefully to some of you guys that's interesting, and you have to wonder if Sony is going to turn around and do something very similar to this. I guess we'll see. We will see in due time. But there you go. That's about all I have to say on that one. Next one up is an interesting thing that caught my attention. So do you guys remember there was a one time when Kojima and Konami were still getting along, they were working on a game called Silent Hills, which would of course be part of the Silent Hill franchise. And they actually released a demo of this ill-fated project that was ultimately canceled and sort of kind of resurfaced as Death Stranding, I think. But initially it was Silent Hills. But they released a demo for that called PT, and PT stood for Playable Teaser. However, even though the demo went public and was available on PS4, Konami pulled the demo from Sony servers, and in conjunction with Sony, I guess. And basically, the only people who have access to it now are people who simply never deleted it. But once your system is corrupted, or if you delete it and try to re-download it, you simply can't. It's gone. You can't reacquire it, which is one of the reasons I don't like digital content, but we're not going into that. That's not the point of this discussion. But yeah, somebody decided to remake the entire PT game, if you want to call it that, for PC. It is downloadable now. It's for free as well. So if you never played it and you're just curious, you can look that up, I'm sure, and you can find it and check it out. And you guys know me, if you've been listening to me for a while. I am not a PC gamer. It's not like I don't recognize all the cool things and the benefits that exist on PC gaming. It's just not for me. It doesn't outweigh the things I dislike about it. But this is one of those situations where I go, yeah, that's admittedly very cool. And so, more power to people who want to play that game and never got to, or that demo, I should say, because nobody got to play the actual game. But to the people who want to play that demo, you can actually do it now. So there is a method available to you. Granted, it's not the original version. It's some guy's remake of that, but better than nothing, I guess. So yeah, I thought that was kind of neat. But that's really all there is to say about that. Moving on to another subject. This subject is actually, well, sort of, selected for us by Kyle Vaughn. Kyle Vaughn is a backer of mine, and every month he gets to pick a subject. However, Kyle has a history of just, letting me pick whatever subject I want on his behalf. And that's exactly what he did in this case. I always check with him, but in this case, that's, this is what he said. And he's like, nah, just go ahead, pick whatever you want. So in this case, the subject I thought he would find the most interesting is, for those who may not remember, and I'm sure that would be a lot of you, the original Xbox, when Microsoft first got into it and they were first announcing it and talking about it, they built these ridiculous prototypes that looked like a giant metal X that was like vertical. And it actually cost them 18 grand to build each of these prototypes. And they apparently built more than one. There's a few of them. And they were huge. They were very heavy, very big, and they were meant to just kind of get people's attention. There's infamously in GDC, at the GDC 2000 event, Game Developers Conference 2000, Bill Gates was out there showing it off. And a lot of people always wondered, like, what happened to that, because they went from that design to ultimately the final version of the original Xbox that we got. What was the transition period there, and what happened in these prototypes? Now, the article and things I've read about it lately, nobody really seems to have a great bit of information on exactly why they changed the design. When you read between the lines, it seems kind of obvious. It's just that the devices were impractical. It would have been too big and too bulky, even more so than what the final version actually was. It was meant to just kind of get people's attention, is what it seems like the reason was. However, the question of what happened to the prototypes, we don't know the fate of all of them, but we do know that at least one of them is now on display at the new Microsoft Visitor Center at their corporate headquarters in Redmond, Washington. Now, I've actually been to that facility a few years ago, but this wasn't on display at that time. So if I get to go back, I'd love to see that thing, because that's just neat. But the idea that this prototype just sat somewhere and is preserved and is just now visible to the public, I think is neat. I know Kyle personally has an affinity for rare oddball hardware like I do, so that's just neat to me that thing is still sitting out there somewhere. So yeah, I'm glad that people can at least see it, take photos of it, and all that kind of stuff. I'd be very curious to see what it does, if it does anything other than just light up. I mean, does it actually can it play anything? I doubt there was any software written for it. As far as I know, there was never even like a disk drive for it. But again, I've never seen it in person. There hasn't been a whole like in-depth analysis of how that hardware worked. So I don't know. I honestly don't know, but it's just cool that it does exist. So in theory, we can find that all out at some point. So very neat. But yeah, that's really all there is to say about that. If you want to go check it out, again, it's at the new Microsoft Visitor Center in Redmond, Washington. It's just on display in a glass case. So very, very cool. So yeah, thank you very much, Kyle. Moving on, so this one is not so much a news subject as just kind of something I was thinking about the other day, and I wondered if anybody had a similar story. So what I was thinking about was when I was a kid, and as kids often do, you get resistant to certain things with no great reason to be. Like, for example, I'll use video games as an example here. So like maybe your kid, your parents bought you like, an N64 when you were a kid. And, maybe you had some friends who had PlayStation. You didn't have PlayStation. You couldn't afford PlayStation, whatever. And so you therefore hated PlayStation. You're like, no, I'm N64. Fuck PlayStation. Like for no reason. You really have no reason to actually dislike PlayStation other than that you just don't have one. Kids being kids. You just find reasons to dislike things. So the question I have before you is, did you ever run into a situation where you resisted a game, like specifically for some reason, probably a stupid bullshit reason, and you eventually played it kind of against your will and ended up loving it? Let me give you an example, because this did happen to me, and I thought about this the other day. This is gonna sound ridiculous in hindsight, but again, I keep saying, kids think stupid shit. I was a kid once. That meant I thought stupid shit. So in my case, I remember when I was in I must have been in middle school. I was hanging with a buddy of mine, and he was constantly trying to get me to play Metal Gear Solid, and I wouldn't do it. I don't know why. I just wouldn't play it. And at one time, I had another buddy who picked up the Bleemcast disc for Metal Gear Solid. Now, if you guys, that's a side story, but for those who don't know, there were 3 discs by this company called Bleem for the Dreamcast that allowed you to play very specific PlayStation titles. One was Metal Gear Solid, and the other 2 were Gran Turismo 2 and Tekken 3. Now, basically, the way it worked is if you had that disc, you pop that into your Dreamcast, and then when it was done booting, you would take it out and put in the PlayStation disc, and it would just play the PlayStation game, but it would have all sorts of enhancements to the game using the additional benefits that the Dreamcast had that the PlayStation itself did not. So I had, follow my line of logic here, I had one friend who really wanted me to play Metal Gear Solid. I had a second friend who happened to own that particular Bleemcast disc for Metal Gear Solid. And I, of course, owned a Dreamcast. So you kind of put that together and you think, okay, we're going to play that game. Well, technically, yes, that wasn't intentional. There was a time where, for whatever reason, all of us went out to New Jersey. Like, my mom just took us all out to New Jersey. Now, again, as I mentioned at the beginning, I live in Chicago. And so it's like 1,000 miles away, 900 miles away. But we all took this, trip out to New Jersey to, go to a beach house and hang out, their parents paid for them and whatever. So we all just went. And I brought the Dreamcast, and I brought a few different games for it. And I guess my 2 friends had kind of talked to each other and decided to bring Metal Gear Solid and bring the Bleemcast disc. And they brought it with, and, we were at a certain point, we had kind of run out of other things to do. And then they said, well, why don't we play Metal Gear Solid? And I was like, no, we can't play Metal Gear Solid. First of all, we don't have it. Second of all, it's, we don't have a PlayStation, whatever. And, so they just kind of presented they had brought, and I was like, fine, fuck it. Go ahead, play your damn Metal Gear Solid. Again, I don't know why the hell I was so resistant to it. Just for no reason. I was a stupid kid. What do you want? But of course we played it, and where I'm going with this is that, of course, I fell in love with the game. It's a fantastic fucking game, possibly in my top 10 of all time. You know what I mean? It's an amazing, amazing first game. And I'm just curious if anybody else has any stories like that, where they just, for no reason, were very resistant, probably because they were in their youth, but then just decided to try something under some sort of strange circumstance that caused it to change. Not so much it's a game I didn't have interest in and I picked it up and it surprised me. Like a game you absolutely didn't want to play, but then it somehow wooed you. Did that happen to anybody out there? I'm curious. So yeah, that was pretty much it. It was just kind of a brain fart, and I was just wanted to know if anybody had anything similar to that. So I guess we'll move on here. At this point in the show, what we're going to do is we're going to do some shout outs. So these are all Patreon backers. Every single one of these people has, thankfully, I appreciate this, has donated to the Patreon, and they're at the level in which they get a shout out. So I'll just kind of just do a rapid fire thing here, say all your names. We have a couple of new people, so I want to welcome them, especially in addition, of course, to the people who've been around for quite some time. But thank you to Michael Kelly, Justin Webb, Jonas Pachanka, Corey Marsh, Rob Janos, Luis Bonilla, Eric Peralez, Trey Wagner, and Tim Inman. Thank you to all of you. Once again, that's Michael Kelly, Justin Webb, Jonas Pachanka, Corey Marsh, Rob Janos, Luis Bonilla, Eric Peralez, Trey Wagner, and Tim Inman. Thank you guys, all of you, so much. I really do seriously appreciate it. If anybody out there wants to join the Patreon, again, you get the benefit of getting this really early, but you also get regular videos early. You can be on this podcast if you really want to. You get shout outs, and you can pick subjects and all that kind of stuff. All the information's over there on the Patreon. I seriously do appreciate it. As you guys know, YouTube continues to screw its creators more and more and more. So yeah, I hate that while at one time Patreon was just kind of a nice little bonus thing to make your life a little easier on YouTube, and now it's mandatory. I hate that, but it is what it is. So I appreciate the support of Michael, Justin, Jonas, Corey, Rob, Luis, Eric, Trey, and Tim. Seriously, thank you. As well, of course, Kyle and all the other people who support in general. Thank you very much. But let's move on to things that are not as depressing. Well, this one is kind of, I guess. So I'm sure a lot of you have heard of this by now. But Jim Carrey is set to play Eggman or Dr. Robotnik in the Sonic the Hedgehog movie. Yeah, that about sums up my reaction. And it's just a big gap because I don't know what to really make of that. First of all, I had heard the Sonic movie was gonna be a thing. And I was kind of like, really? All right. I mean, I guess. Did anybody really ask for that? I don't know. But all right. Good luck. And then they, bringing Jim Carrey in. I mean, you could do worse. Jim Carrey's a talented actor. He could probably bring some sort of comedic talent or some sort of personality to that character. I don't disagree with the casting choice. Let's put it that way. He'll probably wear some sort of fat suit or something or whatever they're going to do. I do not disagree with the casting choice. It's more like I'm surprised that this is real, and I'm surprised he attached himself to it unless he thinks it's good or he's doing it for his kids or something. I don't know exactly what the deal would be, because Jim Carrey, while he's been in many things that weren't that great, he tends to be a pickier actor these days. And I don't know, unless they're either throwing a dump truck full of money at him or his kid. I for some reason I think there's a kid angle there. Unless there's something like that, I don't know why he would do this movie unless it actually is a competent script, which I would have a really hard time believing because of all the franchises, video game franchises that have a competent story that you could theoretically translate to film. Sonic has never sounded like one of them. And something tells me that the Sonic the Hedgehog movie is going to be that stupid, old, terrible plot of the characters from this TV show or video game or whatever somehow all get suddenly transported to the real world. Those terrible Smurfs movies or Enchanted or what was it? The old He-Man and the Masters of the Universe movie. It's that terrible concept of just bringing characters to the regular everyday world to bounce off of our reality. Now they do that for production reasons because a lot of these universes are too fucking expensive to be able to create on film for a movie that you don't have that much confidence in. So they're just like, oh no, it's fine. He got magically transported to New York, so that's why everything is New York. Ha ha ha. I hate that plot line. It's just it's lazy and screams lack of confidence in your product. And if you can't come up with a good enough movie to set in their own universe, there's a pretty good chance you probably shouldn't be making that movie in the first place. And I've heard, though I don't know this, that that's kind of the basic plot line of the Sonic movie. Because, I mean, of all, like I said, man, and you guys know me and my love for Sega, and I even work with Sega on a direct basis, but even I can't be like, dude, why would you do this? It just doesn't seem like there's a a competent movie there. But I'd love to be wrong, but I'll watch a trailer, you know, when that eventually gets around. But something tells me this is gonna be one that I'm just like, nah, man, I don't need to see that. But I guess we'll find out in due time, won't we? So yeah, there you go. Jim Carrey is gonna play Dr. Robotnik. That'll be a thing. Moving on to other movies, though, I did see some. I saw Incredibles 2. And so this is, if you haven't seen it or whatever, and you want to avoid spoilers, just skip, because I will openly talk about it. So yeah, that's your warning right there. Incredibles 2 was, to me, a pretty good movie. It was very similar in a lot of ways, of course, to Incredibles 1, which would be logical. It actually takes place immediately after Incredibles 1. Like, immediately after. It even has overlap scenes with Incredibles 1. Like, oh, you didn't know it, but Incredibles 1, this was happening, you know, you missed it. And I liked that aspect of it. It's, you know, they were dealing with the immediate aftermath of the Underminer coming up there. The Underminer being the John Ratzenberger villain who just kind of randomly shows up at the end of the first movie. He actually had a video game based on him on the original Xbox, GameCube, PS2. There was The Incredibles: Rise of the Underminer, which was supposed to be like the quasi sequel to The Incredibles, which now I guess would be non-canon. But yeah, which I thought it was cool that they just directly went with that. The other thing I liked about, I mean, from a plotline standpoint, it was good, but it was very predictable in its villain. When we were introduced to the two major new characters, it was unbelievably obvious that one of them, at least, if not both, would be the villain. And it turned out to be that one of them, however not the other, was the villain. And it's like, yeah, I wasn't really surprised by that at all. Aside from that issue, I enjoyed the movie quite a bit. Yeah, I don't know if I really have much else to say on it, though. Like, it didn't set itself up for some, like, obvious wink at the camera for a third movie or anything like that. They certainly could do a third one. It is not outside the realm of possibility. And I know the movie made a crap ton of money. So hopefully if they decide to do a third one, they kind of wait, again, like they did with the second one, just to make sure that they have some sort of story that they're confident in. Because the movie itself, like, outside of the villain issue, it was very competently told. You know, it wasn't a wholly, like, original story or anything, but it was intriguing enough, and it was different enough from the first one to be able to tell, while still having a lot of similarities to the first to make you feel obviously connected to that same universe. And it addressed certain fan theories that people have had about, like, what Jack's deal is and all stuff like that. So I liked that. Overall, I did enjoy the movie, but definitely not my favorite Pixar sequel. That probably still goes to Toy Story 2 or 3. Speaking of which, Toy Story 4 is going to be a thing. I'm looking forward to that. We'll see, though. I don't know. I look forward to it on the simple basis that it's Toy Story 4 without knowing anything else about it. So we'll get around to that eventually. But yeah, Incredibles 2. If you liked the first one, I'd say, yeah, go out and see it for sure. Next up, I also saw Jurassic World: Fallen Kingdom. This one... Same thing, first of all, on spoilers. I'm going to talk openly about it, so feel free to jump around. Jurassic World: Fallen Kingdom, before I watched this, I went back and I sat down and I rewatched all the Jurassic Park movies, including the one that I cut together, Jurassic Park 1.5, which is based on Jurassic Park the game, which might sound really conceited, but the game is actually considered canon, so, you know, whatever. If you want to watch it in a movie form, it's there. It's on my channel. Enjoy. But this movie was, when I first saw the trailers for this, I thought, wow, this is Lost World, but even worse. And then it kind of didn't really change. Like, I remember watching it and just being like, I can't tell if I hate this or not. Because it was monumentally stupid. You know, you just have, like, comically evil bad guys just trying to sell, like, dinosaurs and again, and you just have, like, the obvious thing of, oh no, they escaped and they're killing people again. It's like everything about it is obvious, man. And then you do stupid things like, for example, I mean, I know a lot of people are pointing this out, but I want to say it too. Like, so they talk about the new hybrid raptor thing. They're like, oh, it's so smart and it can murder anything, and oh my god, it's the best thing ever. It's totally not dangerous though, because we can use it as a weapon, because that's a smart plan. They're like, what you need this gun, and you like aim a laser at your target, and then the thing will go over and kill that. And as everyone points out, like, well, why don't you just shoot the gun? It's like, if you need that precise of an accurate, like an aiming system to the point where you could just hit it with a gun, why aren't you just doing that? Why are you sending a damn dinosaur after it? That's not exactly subtle. So yeah, I agree with that. That was really stupid. I mean, in the movie, they try to argue that, man, we humans have been using animals in combat forever, but it's like, not really, man. I mean, like, we have, but it's very different. It's, you had to ride a horse into combat because we didn't have tanks, and once we did, we stopped riding horses. Shit like that. It's just like every one of those, you can definitely come up with an excuse as to why we wouldn't still do that. I don't know, man. It just screamed stupid to me. It screamed popcorn stupid. What I mean by that is it's not meant to try and be a smart message. It's meant to appeal to a mass audience who just want to see shit blow up and shit get ripped apart, and like they don't really care about the lore of the franchise. They don't take the lore too seriously, because what you're doing is you're really adding a whole lot of stuff to the backlog of a really good concept, and just completely fucking with it. And I really didn't like that. Like the idea that they're like, oh yeah, here's Hammond's like friend who nobody ever saw and was never mentioned. Turns out he and Hammond came up with everything together, which definitely retcons a lot of stuff. And they're like, oh yeah, and Hammond had this whole problem with, the daughter being like a clone, and Hammond wanted this to be a preserve and not sell stuff. And it's like, no, he did want to sell stuff. Like, he had a gift shop, you know what I mean? Like, you're just fucking with the lore of the movies and not taking it all too seriously. And I also don't like the way that, especially like in the first Jurassic World, which is actually the fourth movie, I don't like how characters talk about the first movie like it was a movie. So like there's that scene where I call him Nick from New Girl, Nick with a mustache from New Girl, is in Jurassic World, and he's like talking about, oh, I got this shirt, man, like that first park was legit, blah, blah, blah. He's like basically recapping the first movie in a sense, to kind of get into the nostalgia that you all have for that movie. But it's like, no, dude, that was in your universe. That actually happened. You gotta not approach it like that. I don't blame him. He's the actor. He's doing what he's supposed to be doing. But the way that this, shall we call it, Jurassic World franchise has gone is it treats, it's like the first three movies happened, but we're gonna kind of put a cloud over it, a cloud of nostalgia, so that we play into the fact that you vaguely remember it, and we'll capitalize on the parts you liked the most. And I don't know, to me that's disrespectful of the original lore. I don't know if you guys agree with me or even really get what I'm saying, but that's just how I feel about stuff like that. It just feels like, you have new cooks in the kitchen and they're not trying to make the same meal. Does that make any sense? They're trying to make you remember the meals you used to have or something like that, but they're not making it anymore. I don't know. That's just kind of how it felt. So I just ultimately, when I got out of Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, I was like, this has the potential to set up another movie that's good, but this is not that movie. Like what this movie succeeded in is it got the dinosaurs off of the island and it put them into our world, which I know is just giving a whole lot of shit about Jim Carrey or not Jim Carrey, but like the Sonic movie and all that shit. But they were already literally in our world. They just weren't in the same landmass as us. So you get it. But I like that aspect of it. They brought them to our side of things, and it could actually go somewhere and be smarter and be deeper and be a message about, humans fucking up their own environment and putting themselves into, almost like an extinction level problem. Now, granted, most of the dinosaurs are going to be incapable of that, because I think for the most part, there was only like one of each. And yeah, I don't know how much of a problem that's going to be. It's going to be an invasive species thing. Like, they're going to cause a hell of a lot of damage, but whether or not they could actually take over in any sense, I'm sure that's the message they'll be going for in the next one, which is inevitable. So we'll see. But this feels like a weird bridge from nostalgia cloud to maybe something really cool in the form of the next one. That could actually be good, because it could be the one movie where, because Jurassic Park movies, other than the first one, all suffer from inherent flaws. where you don't have the advantage of like the audience is in awe or in wonder, and every single character in all the sequels basically has to be a complete idiot to be in that situation. See, in the first movie, it was the audience doesn't really know what they're going to see. So you have that angle, and then you also have they're there voluntarily because everything is supposed to be working. But you know, in the sequels after that, it's just people doing stupid shit, and you as the audience know if they go to that island, they're stupid, and then they do it. So then they're stupid, and the movie is stupid, and they just have a huge disadvantage. This one has the next one, when I say the sixth one, has the advantage of at least being like, these people didn't volunteer for this shit. There's just dinosaurs living among them now, and they have to deal with that crap. That angle can work and can be exciting, potentially. And I know I wasn't the only one who thought this. When I came out of the theater on that movie, I didn't know if I hated it. I didn't know what else to think about it, but the one impression I got is it really reminded me all of a sudden of the Resident Evil movie franchise. And I was like, did we just do that? Because it felt like, I don't remember which one it is, but I think it's the end of like the second one, or Apocalypse or whatever it is, where like they're like, oh, everybody's gonna die, and then the third one starts with just like her in a desert, and she's like sole survivor there's like a few others, and I was like, I feel like we just ended on the Resident Evil 2 movie, and the third one's gonna start with like most of the destruction's already been done. I don't know. I'm scared of that, because the idea that Jurassic Park, one of the biggest movies of all time, the franchise that came of it and everything, could be dragged so far down into the realm of the Resident Evil movies is depressing. Now, I want it on the record. I enjoy the Resident Evil movies because they know exactly what they are. They're schlock, and they know they're schlock. They're garbage, but they know they're garbage, and that's why they work. That's why they're fun. But that's not supposed to... The Jurassic franchise is supposed to be more dignified. I don't know. You tell me. What do you guys think? Moving on, a movie I have not seen yet, so this will be short. However, by the time this is public, most of you will have seen this, is Antman and the Wasp. At the time I record this, I intend to see this tomorrow because it's not actually out yet. So there's really not much to say other than this is kind of the thing that's meant to hold us over, along with Captain Marvel, I guess, before we get the next Avengers movie. I don't know if I have any great expectations for it. I believe it probably, correct me if most of you probably will be able to correct me if I'm wrong on this. But we assume this takes place before Infinity War is over. But I guess we will see. I'm not super excited about it. It just feels like this movie maybe should have come out before Avengers, but I say that having not seen it, so I could go into it and be like, oh, never mind, that doesn't make any sense anymore. But yeah, there's really not much else to say at this point. I'll give you guys more of an assessment on it next month after I've actually seen it. But that said, looking forward to it. Not super hyped, but I want to see it. So that's it. We'll move on. Next up here, this is just kind of a short thing because I know a lot of you guys already have been following me. So first of all, I've been doing a whole lot of stuff with Sega and specifically Shenmue as of late. A lot of posts about them, a lot of content that Sega has entrusted me with and given me like exclusive access to report on and all that kind of stuff, which was very, very cool of them to do. And even though they'll never hear this, I want to issue a huge thank you to them. But it's been nuts, man. And I want to apologize to anyone who watches this channel who doesn't care about Shenmue, because I realize there's a nice string there where it was just Shenmue videos. And it's like, if you don't care, then it's just getting obnoxious. So I appreciate that you weren't dicks about it. That's always nice. But yeah, it's one day, hopefully, I can talk about all this stuff that I would really love to say about all the behind the scenes of how all this has been going, because there's some fascinating stories in there. But at this point in time, I'm still under NDA and everything, so I can't talk about it. But just want you guys to know I really do appreciate all the Shenmue fans who've been involved with this and are making this such a worthwhile effort. You have no idea how far your efforts have actually gone. I look forward to being able to openly talk about all this stuff one day, but for now, it's just, you guys have been hitting it out of the park. You're fantastic. So that's really all I'm going to say on that. So thank you very much. And a couple other things, just quick points here before we get going. First up, so I recently, obviously, if you listen to this, you have some interest in podcasts. So I actually have 2 others you can listen to if you want. I was a guest on the Dreamcast Junkyard podcast. Last month I actually posted it on my channel, and feel free, you can go ahead and listen to it. I'm on there with, of course, the regulars who run the Dreamcast Junkyard podcast, which would be Tom, Kevin, and Mike, I believe. As well as in the other case, there was a special guest, which was Dreamcast guy, Max. So he and I have known each other. We've met, we've hung out, but you know, they had him on the podcast as well, and we all just talked and stuff and had a good time. In fact, we were so verbose in our discussions that we ended up never getting to the Q&A section, which was too bad. That would have been nice, but I told them, like, man, next time just do nothing but a Q&A section. We can crush that, no problem. So if you want to listen to that, you go ahead and give it a listen on my channel. There's also some older episodes I was in, including one with Corey Marshall, who is the voice of Ryo Hazuki in Shenmue. So that was actually the first time I'd ever spoken to Corey, so that was pretty neat. So yeah, and the other one is, this one's much more random and is more of a cameo. My buddies who run the Missouri Game Con do a podcast called VGS, the video game show. And they did one the other day at the time I record this. And while they were recording, my buddy Jake just messaged me, and he's just like, hey, we're doing our podcast. Do you mind if I call you and just Skype you in, or well, in this case, it was like Facebook call into the, into the podcast. And I was like, sure. So I literally got on, and I was on this live show. And so I was only on for like 5 minutes, but basically they were just talking about the news of the day. And one of the news items that day was the Shenmue release date had come out and all this other stuff. And they were debating how that got leaked, or not leaked, but how it was released. And one of them's like, oh yeah, no, Sega posted it. And they're like, no, I'm pretty sure Adam posted it. And they're sitting there like, well, fuck, we know Adam. Why don't we just ask him? So they called me up, and I literally said that, which was true. Sega gave me permission to post about it first and everything, and post the trailer and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that was an interesting little cameo to be on there. And that leads very well into the final subject here, which is, in case you're curious, I will be at some conventions this summer. The 2 I know for sure that I will be at is the Missouri Game Con in St. Louis, which is, again, run by these guys. So please come out to that. That's in early August, I believe the 3rd through the 5th. You can actually sign up for passes on their website. If you use my name, just my first name, as a coupon code, you'll get 25% off of your fee for your ticket. So go ahead and feel free to use that. The other one I'll be at for sure is AVGC in New Jersey later this year in September. I'll remind you guys of this stuff, but as we get closer, I figured you want to check that out. There's some other conventions I might be at, well, this summer anyway. I know that I'll be at Portland Retro Game Expo later in the fall. I'm like 99% sure I'll be at PAX West. I am like 50-50 that I'll be at Gamescom this year in Germany. So I don't know that one for sure yet, obviously. Once I know, I'll announce it. If you don't follow me on like Twitter or Instagram or stuff like that, do that, because that's usually, I post more convention updates and things like that over there, just because there's no reason to make like a whole video about it usually. But yeah, there you go. So for now anyway, that's kind of my convention scene. My travel schedule is still ridiculous, but it's not always for conventions, a lot of events and other things. So yeah, I'll keep you guys posted as always. So the only other thing I want to say is, hopefully you checked out, if you're watching this in the public version, hopefully you got to check out all the content that came out this month. There were some cool pickups videos, obviously some other Shenmue videos, some funnier ones, as well as just some reviews and things like that. So, and if you haven't, well, spoilers, those are the things that are coming. So I hope you enjoy it. Anyway, guys, that's it. Thank you very much, especially to all the Patreon backers, which once again would be Kyle, Michael, Justin, Jonas, Corey, Rob, Luis, Eric, Trey, and Tim. Thank you all so much, and thank you guys for listening. Really appreciate it. See you guys later.